Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Boffy. I am the president of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in Louisiana. For the last 12 years, I have had the honor of serving on this education board. Today we are here so that I can make an announcement about the appeals process of the LEAP graduation requirement. But before we get to that, there's a few things that I'd like to share with you. One of the things I want to share with you is I think a secret to a good life is figuring out how you can use your gifts for your community. And while I have your attention, I want to let you know that our schools need people. Our schools need bus drivers, and our schools need teachers, and our schools need other staff members to help them run. So if you find yourself in a position where you're not using your gifts, I'm going to encourage you to come into the school system and use your gifts for the children of our state. Just this morning, I got a call for a child who was not able to make their credential test because they did not have a bus driver. So please know that using your gifts can make a difference. Also, when I was in the classroom, I used to use this book with my 8th grade students. Now, I'm sure you can imagine the reactions I got when I took out a picture book with 8th graders, right? But if you haven't seen this book, it's called The Important Book by Margaret Wise Brown. And it talks about the important things. And the important thing about this policy that we're going to talk about today is that it's intended to create opportunities for students in our state. And so we're going to share a little bit with you today. We have a number of individuals who are going to speak. I've asked them to introduce themselves as they come up.
Good morning. My name is Jose Gonzalez, and I'm the principal of Hondo High School. Last year, we had a student, we'll call him Allie, who had earned the NCCR Level 1 welding certification and was offered a job by a local contractor upon graduation. However, the student could not pass one of the standardized test pairs required by the state. He was unable to graduate, although he had met all of the graduation requirements, earned valued industry-based certification, achieved a silver on the workings assessment, had been offered employment by a contractor, and participated in the St. Charles Parish Public Schools Career and Technical Signing Day. Fortunately, despite not participating in graduation, Alan chose to remain in school one more year and participate in this year's retesting cycle in order to graduate. The student is still not guaranteed to pass this assessment, but with the appeals process, Alan is excited to earn a high school diploma in December and contribute to his community by pursuing his dream career in welding. Another student, we'll call him Alex, had severe and near debilitating anxiety. He meets with a therapist regularly and received consistent mental health and remediation supports from the school. In total, he took the U.S. history test 5 times and the biology test 7 times. Unfortunately, he was unable to graduate with his peers last spring, but like Alan, he is excited for the opportunity to engage in the appeals process and further his future opportunities. A third and final student, we'll call him Lawrence, overcame several academic challenges throughout his high school career, but eventually was able to take advantage of all school supports needed to earn all R&D credits. He took the biology test 8 times and the U.S. history test 6 times. However, due to the testing requirement, not graduated. My ultimate fear is that many other students like Alan, Alex, and Lawrence may opt to drop out of school and attempt to navigate job searches without a high school diploma, despite being qualified for jobs that may lead to career opportunities. Some students may excel in high-demand specific skill sets needed by the industry. However, these same individuals may struggle with demonstrating more generalized skills and content knowledge as measured by the standardized test. If the student can demonstrate future readiness by demonstrating industry-based skills and mindsets, and the student's opportunities should not be jeopardized by a single standardized test that may not be pertinent to his or her future plans.
Hi, my name is Dr. Anna West, and I work with Humanities AMPS. We are an educational community organization that partners closely with East Baton Rouge Parish School System. We support students and teachers in high school classrooms, including many English language learners. I'm here to speak on behalf of those students and teachers with whom I work. Many English learners who make it to their senior year have already shown incredible determination, learning the language as they go, retaking some classes to pass them, or doubling up on classes because credits from their home country were not transferable. At Terra High School, the high school where I work, with the second highest English learner population in East Baton Rouge, there are 20 English learners on track to graduate this year. A small subset of those students has not yet been able to pass the required LEAP exams. They have worked hard and they continue to try. However, several of them could benefit from the portfolio assessment, which would allow them to show their intelligence and their competence. As of yet, Louisiana has not allowed that intelligence and competence to be shown in any other way than a standardized test. Some former students come back every year to try and pass those tests. One is a young man, 23 years old, who finished his coursework 5 years ago, and he is still coming back to school every December and every April to retest. He wants to go to college, and thus far, he's been unable to do that. We are the only state in the country where he would not be allowed to do that. Jay is another former student who works at a plant. He holds 2 industry-based credentials. He passed both the OSHA certification and the Safe Serve exam, which allows restaurant licensing. He also continues to return to school each semester trying to pass the LEAP exams so that he can become a manager, a job that requires a high school diploma. If these students could be given the chance to prove their intelligence through an alternative assessment, they could show their understanding of the content and their work ethic. The LEAP exam does not divorce a student's content proficiency with their English language level, and that is why it is discriminatory towards English language learners. A student with deep knowledge and content standards may not do well on the corresponding state standardized test because all of the test questions and case studies on that test are written in English. Translation is not an option, as the language of the test must match the language of instruction, which Louisiana policy already acknowledges. The science of language studies tells us that every language learner is different, and there are many factors affecting the acquisition process, and why some students, although they are able to complete other kinds of assessments, are unable to pass the test. We must follow the example of other states and allow students to demonstrate content mastery through a rigorous portfolio system. We owe it to our students and educators to hold high standards, but fair standards. That is what a fair and just educational policy looks like. Thank you.
My name is Corey Hebert, and I'm a teacher. Willow is a 5th-year senior in Claiborne Parish. Her superintendent shared, Willow is a hardworking student who is polite, respectful, and gives her all on anything she attempts. In addition to attending school, she is employed working afternoons and evening shifts. She was scheduled to graduate in May of 2023, however was unable as she could not pass the required standardized test. With 30 credits, she committed to keep trying. During her high school career, Willow earned 5 industry-based credentials and has achieved the National Career Readiness Certificate. She achieved graduation qualification scores in both English and geometry. However, she has been unable to do so in biology and U.S. history. Willow has participated in remediation, intervention, and summer school. She has attempted both biology and U.S. history every time the testing window has been available to her. She struggles on tests, but excels in life. She aspires to continue her education at Bossier Parish Community College, where she wants to pursue a career as a physical therapy assistant and has been approved to enroll upon graduating high school. Willow has family and friends that have recently graduated from high school across the state line while from a private BESE-approved school. She is keenly aware that she didn't have to successfully pass the exams to qualify for graduation. Her question is, how is this fair? And to her, I have no answer.
My name is Shirley Chavez, and I'm an educator in Wilkins Parish. The stories of students you have just heard have been invisible for years. But when the COVID pandemic hit and the testing requirement was waived temporarily, teachers of English learners like myself found that our students were finally able to graduate using their cognitive units and demonstrated knowledge over time. Prior to COVID, less than half of English learners were graduating in Louisiana, 41%. And in an effort to keep this protection post-pandemic, we created a statewide coalition of educators who proposed a policy for expanded graduation criteria for recently arrived immigrant students. But as we listened to the students, families, and educators across the state, we learned that it was more than just English learners who were being denied a diploma based on a single test score. It was other students too. Students with dyslexia, students with acute health conditions, students who are parenting. And these specific students who have been historically denied a diploma due to challenges with the mechanics of test taking were finally having their stories heard. And so it was a beautiful thing in June when this newly expanded coalition came to BESE and said, look at me, I am more than just a test scorer. I am a bright young person with a future and talents to give to my community. And so compelled by each story told, enriched by the diversity and perspective in our coalition, and inspired by each student's courage and potential, BESE approved an appeals process of the standardized test requirement. As a teacher, I deeply value standardized assessment. Tests unveil disparity in outcomes. They allow us to diagnose subgroup and systemic inequities. They allow us to deploy resources in targeted intervention as a remedy. We should not, however, use tests as the single determinant to deny an individual child's high school diploma and hinder their post-secondary potential. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics indicates that earning a high school diploma triples the number of job opportunities available to a high school student post-graduation. Earning a high school diploma is worth approximately $10,000 per year in additional income. These dollars increase the future economic mobility of even these students' own future children. But these are not statistics, these are stories. As an 18-year-old single mother with no home, with no car, with no family, but a high school diploma in hand, I knew I had to change the narrative for my own child. A daycare took a chance on me. They saw I had a high school diploma. They saw that means I had accomplished something. And they gave me an opportunity to work in the daycare, bring my daughter to work with me, and thus make steps towards breaking the cycle of poverty. And this is my why as a teacher. My work as a teacher is to leverage a quality education to break systemic oppression and generational poverty. We cannot then perpetuate a system that pushes the most marginalized students out of employment and enrollment opportunities.
Hello, my name is Dr. Belinda Davis, and I serve as a member of BESE. Originally, the appeals process was intended for our English language learners. But as I began to look at the research around best practices across the country with a particular emphasis on Texas, I realized that Louisiana was out of step with what was going on in the rest of the country. 30 years ago, as standardized testing became commonplace, schools and districts and states across the country used those standardized tests in two ways. They counted that test as part of a student's overall grade in a course, or they used them as a high-stakes test, and if a certain cut score was not met, a diploma could be denied. In Louisiana, we do both of those things. As standardized tests gained in popularity, at one point there were 30 states using their standardized test as a high-stakes test to deny a student a diploma. Today, there are only 8. And of those 8, Louisiana was the only one to not provide an appeals process for their students. The question to ask is, why did those 30 states keep standardized testing but abandon the high-stakes testing model? It's because 25 years of research shows that high-stakes testing is not consistently related to improved education outcomes or improved employment outcomes. It is, however, consistently linked to higher dropout rates for our students. Louisiana has one of the highest rates of disengaged youth in the country. That means we have the highest number of 16 to 25-year-olds who are not engaged in school or engaged in employment. The Excel appeals process is a tool that we can use for a small group of students who are really willing to do the extra work to open a door to future economic outcomes for them as well as education outcomes. The Excel appeals process is for graduating seniors who have not met the cut score on the state standardized tests. They are required to do 3 things. First, they must earn all of the Carnegie credits required for their diploma. 2, they must demonstrate content proficiency by either passing the state standardized test or providing proof of competency through a portfolio with a standards-aligned rubric. Third, they must demonstrate evidence of employability by either earning a TOPS Tech scholarship, by earning a silver on the work keys, or earning an industry-based credential. In addition, they must also meet with a community leader who is going to provide them with counseling around career opportunities post-high school. This appeals process has several guardrails in place to encourage a focus on passing the standardized tests and to ensure that it is implemented correctly. Each student is required to do 30 hours of remediation on the standardized test that they did not pass, and they must retake the test. Second, the decision maker around the appeals process is the head of the local educational authority. So either the superintendent or the CEO of a charter school. While a school building level committee recommends passage or denial of passage, the actual decision must be made by the LEA's leader. Third, there is an audit process in place. If a school's graduation rate through the appeals process is more than 3% of their total graduates, then the state audits that school's process. If the school is found to have been not implementing the appeals process with fidelity, then the Louisiana state superintendent becomes the person that signs off on a student's appeal. In Texas, they have minimal guardrails around their appeals process, and yet in 2021, Texas made their appeal permanent through a unanimous vote of the legislature. Why? Why such overwhelming support for their process? The first is that their appeals process generally has less than 5% of their students graduating using the appeal. The appeal has not opened a floodgate of students using this alternative pathway. But more importantly, the research shows that between 17 and 22% of the students who graduate with the appeal are engaged in post-education activities, and that their persistence rate rivals that of those nationally. And third, perhaps most importantly, 62% of the students who graduate in Texas through the appeals process are engaged in work. They are not disengaged youth. They are employed. And this number is more than double the national percentage of students who drop out of high school. They're engaged in work less than 35% of the time, nearly double. This is success. The adoption of this appeals process with its guardrails here in Louisiana means that we are poised to do as well, if not better, than the state of Texas when it comes to employing our youth. We are the only state in the country where a public high school student can be denied graduation completely based on their score on a standardized test. This appeals policy brings Louisiana in line with the rest of the country. We are already doing what education shows is best practices with a standardized test. We are including that standardized test result in a student's overall test score, coursework. That's because this standardized test score amounts to about 15% or sometimes more of a student's overall test grade. This is how we know here in Louisiana that we are not opening the floodgates with this appeals process, because we have set it up so that if you are a student who is struggling in a class and fails that standardized test, you are not going to pass the class and earn the Carnegie units, and thus you are ineligible for the appeals process. There is every incentive for teachers, for school leaders, and district leaders to work towards passage of standardized tests. Because this process, passing that standardized test, still earns them more points in the accountability system, which we are not changing. We are not touching the state's accountability system, and we are not trying to get rid of standardized testing. These students are required to attempt the standardized test at least twice. We are merely acknowledging what has been well established in education research. For students with dyslexia, for students with testing anxiety, for our English language learners, this appeal gives them another way to demonstrate what they know, another opportunity to show us what they have learned. It allows another chance for a high school diploma to open the door to future economic opportunities for that student and future opportunities educationally. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Erin Atkins, Assistant Principal at Acadiana High School in Scott, Louisiana. I'm here to let you know that not all students who qualify for the appeal will earn their diploma. This does not happen in Texas, and it will not happen in Louisiana. It is estimated that this appeals process will only apply to 3% of graduating seniors, about 1,500 students per year in our state. The educators who work with students daily know when a student is ready to transition to college or to the workforce. Our students are testing at our schools again this week. If any of our students who should have graduated in May do not pass on this attempt, we look forward to implementing the appeals process to ensure their diploma certifies that these students have met the requirements of the policy that BESE has created.
Good afternoon. I'm proud Superintendent Dr. Ken Ortman of St. Charles Parish Public Schools, as well as the Vice President of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. I want to just start by saying we believe the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, as well as St. Charles Parish Public Schools, that every student matters. And it isn't merely an academic obligation to pass an appeals process such as this, but it's a moral imperative. The Excel appeals process doesn't remove the expectation that graduates demonstrate proficiency in math, literacy, science, or social studies, as these students are still required to pass the appropriate courses and assessments associated with those courses during any given school year. Instead, as mentioned previously, the appeals process provides an alternative method for identified specific students to demonstrate, instead of proficiency on those tests, after taking them multiple times, to demonstrate it in other ways, whether through a portfolio and or other expectations as mentioned previously. Louisiana, as you also heard, is only one of 8 states that require the end-of-course test, and only one of those 8 states that require graduation. The opportunity to appeal would allow students to pass all required coursework. Let me say that again. All required coursework for a diploma. The successful completion of those courseworks, in addition to a portfolio, be allowed the opportunity to graduate and earn a diploma. This policy does not exclude student standardized test scores from school accountability. Instead, it provides specific students an opportunity to meet the requirement of a high school diploma by prioritizing their preparation for the workforce. The Excel appeals process is intended to remove roadblocks and not create them to future employment and help students become contributing members of our society. And St. Charles Parish contribute to a global community and global companies as productive citizens in Louisiana that impact the world. As part of the process, it would require students to meet with the workforce innovation opportunity provider, require them to meet, as this is a requirement for the appeals process, to bridge the gap between high school and the workforce. Even beyond connecting with potential employees, the students will be empowered. This process is about meeting current workforce needs, while also designed to meet current national practices and priorities, as evidenced by states who have adopted formative assessments for content and emphasize practical skills that prepare students for post-secondary or workforce success. We strongly believe, as do our strong industry partners that reside in St. Charles Parish, such as Bayer, Shell, IMTT, Bayer, just to name a few, that education and workforce development opportunities in our schools can be the equalizer to sustain a strong workforce in a global market, and they're driving companies based in Louisiana. Education systems must break down the barriers and create pathways for student success, regardless of background, socioeconomic status, or personal challenges, instead of creating. When we empower every student to graduate, we not only unlock their potential to contribute meaningful to society, but also contribute meaningfully to our communities, our state, and most importantly, our country. Thank you.
My name is BESE Alonso. I am a senior at Walter High School at Collegiate Academy School in Oregon.
You don't have to worry about the mic, just loud, so.
My name is BESE Alonso, and I am a senior at Walter High School at Collegiate Academy School in Oregon. I came to the United States 5 years ago, and I have a 4.2 GPA in 8 courses. I do well in my classes, and I am ready to graduate from cardiology. I struggle because I U.S. history because I am trying to concentrate in my classes in English. But I am translating the information in my head to learn and memorize. That means when I am taking an exam, I am translating the equations in my head.
Yes, ma'am, but louder.
My name is BESE Alonso, and I am a senior at Walter High School, Collegiate Academy School in Oregon. I came to the United States 5 years ago, and I have a 4.20 GPA courses. I do well in my classes, and I am ready to graduate to become a cardiologist. I struggle because I use history because I am trying to concentrate in my classes in English, but I am translating the information in my head to learn and memorize it. That means when I am taking an exam, I am translating the exam questions in my for the exam. I mean the question.
Just tell your story. Okay, so what I hear you saying is that you read them in English, you're translating it in your head into Spanish to capture the knowledge in your head, right? Is that what I'm hearing you say? And then what do you do? Tell them, don't read this. Tell them what you do. After you translate it in your head, then do you have to translate it back in English to answer the test question? Okay, why is that hard on a standardized test?
Because it's hard for me to, some words are difficult to talk about.
Oh, you mean there's not direct translation of some English words to Spanish words? Yes, so that makes it a little more difficult. Tell them again what it is that you want to be.
I want to be a cardiologist.
Okay, and what is it going to take for you to become a cardiologist?
2000.
Not anymore, because you can use the appeals process, okay? So let me tell them a little more about that, okay? Good job, Lizzie. Good job. Okay. So that was Lizzie's story. There's some transcripts in the room that I'd like for you guys to grab because I want to tell another student story. His name is Lorenzo. He happens to be my own student. I'm going to give you a second to grab a transcript. I'd like for you to see them. And I want to pull the bottom of the transcript, if you look towards, it's like the last quarter of the page, you'll actually see Lorenzo's credentials. So these are tests that Lorenzo has passed in order to get industry-based credentials, okay? Now, if you look a little farther down, there's this question on transcripts in Louisiana. It says grad test. By grad test, it says no. Lorenzo has not yet passed the grad test. He has passed English 1, Algebra 1, he had to take that one twice, and geometry. He has not yet passed biology or U.S. history. Lorenzo's story is very similar to a lot of the students that you heard today, except for the difference for his is that he's also fighting cancer right now. So while Lorenzo is going from Lafayette to New Orleans every other week for chemo treatments, his educators are trying to fit in the appropriate time for the lead testing window for him to retest in U.S. history and biology. But I want you to go back to the credentials that Lorenzo has, because Lorenzo is qualified to be a welder. All of the welders that I speak to give me information that Lorenzo's ability to make money exceeds my own as a principal with a doctorate, right? When I do the hours, now, I really don't want you pushing on that point because I need teachers. But it is a reality that I get directly from the welders. So Lorenzo is going to have those opportunities. He also deserves a high school diploma. And that's why I'm very proud and excited about the appeals process. And I'm proud of the educators who made the appeals process a reality. And I'm excited that the appeals process will be implemented this month. But the announcement I'm making is that I'm going to withdraw the emergency rule that I passed last week. I passed the emergency rule in order to give the department more time to implement. Instead, that's become a distraction. We have really important work to do, and we should not be distracted by a technicality. So today, that emergency rule will be withdrawn, and the Department of Education will begin implementation on December 20th, when the rule that we passed in June becomes final. So again, December 20th is our implementation date. The department did release at the last BESE meeting potential guidance. We will have to look to the department for the official guidance, but there's at least some information out already for educators like Lissy's educators who need to start compiling information for the appeals process. I do encourage you to reach out to your legislators because I think this should go beyond BESE policy. I'm really proud of what our educators have been able to create working together, and I believe we should see it in state statute. So I encourage you to reach out to your legislators and encourage them to codify this in state statute this spring. And finally, I just want to encourage you all to use your gifts to make our state better. It has been a privilege to serve in this capacity, and I look forward to continuing to serve as a practitioner. We can now take questions. As you can see, we have a variety of roles represented. And so based on your question, we can call up different people. If you know exactly who you'd like to talk to, then you can call them up when you ask your question. Yes?
With the appeal, taking back the emergency orders, so does this mean it doesn't apply now to a certain group of students?
It's just the timeline. So instead of it being effective when it was, the emergency rule was issued last week, instead it'll be effective on December 20th. That's the only change. Yes?
Does that affect any students who, let's say, were going to take lead tests last week?
So the children are still taking their lead test. The children and the educators are still giving them lead tests. There could have been 1,000 people standing with us today. They're in schools administering lead tests for seniors, and And so the students are still taking the test. When the department communicates back as to whether or not the students have passed the test, at that point, the educators will make a decision as to whether or not they move forward through their traditional graduation requirements or through the appeals process.
So students taking the test now could ostensibly go and appeal after the December 20th date?
That's correct. If a student does not pass this week, then they can go back and appeal after December 20th when the policy officially becomes final.
What are your thoughts about the legislative meeting that's supposed to happen tomorrow to talk about this? Have you met with any of the House Education members?
I have not met with any House Education members, and I'm not sure what all they had on the agenda tomorrow besides this emergency rule. I want to thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you showing up in person, and I want to thank our educators, but I really want to thank Lizzie, right? And I want her to know that we're all cheering her on. And anybody who has the courage to come and stand in their non-native language and speak can definitely become a cardiologist. And I just want, another fact that I've learned through this process is that it takes 7 years to acquire a language. So Lizzie, have you been here for 5 years? Okay, so she needs about 2 more years, and then she's going to be taking over the podium for me. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.